Okay, hi. Let's look at Song of Solomon. We're starting into the final chapter. It'll take us probably, I guess, about 3 weeks to finish it. All right, so we're looking at chapter 8, verses 1 to 5 today, which is kind of all about returning home. So here's the passage. The woman says, "Oh, that you were like a brother to me, who nursed at my mother's breasts. If I found you outdoors, I would kiss you. No one would despise me either. I would lead you and bring you into the house of my mother, who used to instruct me. I would give you spiced wine to drink from the juice of my pomegranates." And then she speaks not to him, but to herself, I suppose. "Let his left hand be under my head, and his right hand embrace me." And then someone says, "I want you to swear, O daughters of Jerusalem, do not arouse or awaken my love until she pleases, or possibly do not arouse or awaken love until it pleases." We've talked about that before. "Who is this coming up from the wilderness, leaning on her beloved? Beneath the apple tree I awakened you. There your mother was in labor with you. There she was in labor and gave you birth." Okay, there's some confusing things about this passage. It's also kind of interesting in some different ways. I think the theme is about the connection between human love and being at home and family and a connection to, and this is sort of about childhood sweethearts, if you will. Excuse me. All right, so things to notice. Number one, being like family. This first few verses are a little confusing. "Oh, that you were like a brother to me, who nursed at my mother's breasts. If I found you outdoors, I would kiss you. No one would despise me either." Because obviously, our response when we read that sometimes, I've read this to people, and their first response is, "Ew." They're thinking, I wouldn't want to kiss somebody, a lover like a brother. But of course, this doesn't mean anything incestuous or anything improper, because she says, "I would kiss you, no one would despise me." And it was forbidden to Israelites, at least, and most of the world, to have incest. It would have been despising them if it had been something inappropriate. So she doesn't mean anything inappropriate. She just means, I feel kind of constrained, like I can't tell people how much I love you. I can't hang around with you. I can't be affectionate with you. I sort of wish you were like a brother to me, and then I could just be with you all the time, and I could be openly affectionate, and nobody would find it inappropriate. So it's not meaning anything, inappropriately sexual here. She's just talking about affection and hanging around and wanting to be with him, I think. Remember, they used to use even like he would call her, the man calls the woman many times in this chapter, "my sister, my bride." And sister is a term of affection without it having to mean anything inappropriate or ancestral. So it's important for us to get rid of that idea. That's not what's being said here. She's just saying, I love having you around. I love being around you. I love being able to be openly affectionate with you without any shame or anything to hide. I wish you were as close to me as a brother. I wish you'd sort of grown up with me, because I could be with you all the time. I would lead you and bring you into the house of my mother, who used to instruct me. I want you to be as close to me as family, and I want my family to welcome you and be open to you. I want you to be part of my life, and I want to be part of yours. So this is talking about having him around all the time, being like family. The last verse, "I would give you spiced wine to drink from the juice of my pomegranates." I don't know for sure what that means or how metaphorical it is, but in the context, again, I think it just means I would welcome you. I would make you feel welcome. I don't think it's trying to get anything more explicit than that, although I could be wrong about that. Then, second thing to notice is the connection to previous songs. This is where this really gets interesting, because the last few lines are almost direct quotes from other songs in the book. So let me show you some of those. First of all, back in chapter 3, we said, "What is this coming up from the wilderness, like columns of smoke, perfumed with myrrh and frankincense, with all scented powders of the merchant?" It went on to say, it's Solomon coming to get his bride. But here he says, "Who is this coming up from the wilderness, leaning on her beloved?" So he or they, whoever sings it, turns it around. Instead of Solomon coming up from the wilderness with all this smoke and powders of the scented powders of the merchant and all this pomp and circumstance, it's something else which is equally exciting and equally important. It's her coming up from the wilderness, leaning on, sort of like when you're arm in arm with somebody and you're leaning on and depending on on her beloved. And so it's interesting that connection is there. We'll look at that later. Second, back in chapter 2, she said, I don't know why the verse didn't show up right away. She said, "Like an apple tree among the trees of the forest, so is my beloved among the young men. In his shade I took great delight and sat down, and his fruit was sweet to my taste." Now here she's not talking about a literal apple tree necessarily. She's talking about his being like an apple tree. But presumably there were apple trees all around, and that's why she picks this as a metaphor. In this chapter, he says, beneath the apple tree I awakened you. Now, actually, there's some controversy. Some people think she's speaking here because that's what one of the manuscripts makes it sound like, but it makes more sense in context if it's him speaking. So I'm going to assume it's him speaking, and I may be wrong about that. So he says, I think, beneath the apple tree I awakened you. There your mother was in labor with you. There she was in labor and gave you birth. Now, we'll talk in a minute about why he says there your mother was in labor with you. I don't think he means that her mother gave her birth under an apple tree, but we'll come back to that. Beneath the apple tree I awakened you. As this is a literal apple tree, and it might not be referring to the same thing, but I think it is, because in the next couple verses in chapter 2, it says this, let his left hand be under my head, and his right hand embrace me. I adjure you, and then somebody says, I adjure you, O daughters of Jerusalem, by the gazelles or by the hinds of the field, that you not arouse or awaken my love until she pleases. And in this chapter, we get the same two things. Let his left hand be under my head, and his right hand embrace me. I want you to swear, O daughters of Jerusalem, do not arouse or awaken my love until she pleases. So notice how it almost directly quotes it. So just notice that chapter 8, the last 4 lines or so of what we looked at are almost all direct quotes from chapter 3 or chapter 2. Okay, so let's talk about the fact that this is about returning home, I think. She says, boy, I wish I could just meet you outdoors, freely show my affection to you, bring you home and bring you into the house of my mother who used to instruct me. I would love to bring you home with me. I'd love to bring you to meet my mother, to be part of my family, to be that close to me. And then he says, I think, beneath the apple tree I awakened you. There your mother was in labor with you. There she was in labor and gave you birth. And I did some studying in this, and somebody suggested that what this means is this. Beneath the apple tree is one place. And then when he says there, what's happening is he's walking with her arm in arm as she leans on her beloved. He's walking with her past their childhood home. And he's saying, look, beneath the apple tree, I awakened you. Remember that? And then he points somewhere else and says, there your mother was in labor with you. There she was in labor and gave you birth. So he's saying, we've been here together before. We remember this. We were childhood friends. And we have a rich history together. And I'm here with you. Do you remember beneath the apple tree where we first really fell in love? Do you remember over there where your mother gave you birth? And so he's coming home with her. She's saying, I wish I could bring you home. And he's saying, yes, take me home with you. I have been here also. We have a shared history together. We have a shared story together. This is like the childhood sweetheart passage. And that's, I think, what's going on here. Now, you may not think that's what that means, and that's okay. Again, base it on scripture as best as you can, and we'll just do the best we can with this. But that's what I think is going on here. Fourth, notice the idea of waking up. So I want to talk about this a little bit more detail. Back in chapter 2, somebody said, I adjure you, O daughters of Jerusalem, by the gazelles or by the hinds of the field, that you will not arouse or awaken my love until she pleases. We talked back then about the fact that this could equally well be translated that you will not arouse or awaken love until it pleases. And we looked at different possibilities. Maybe that she was truly asleep and it's saying, don't wake her up yet, let her relax. Maybe that it was saying, you can't hurry love, don't awaken it until it's ready. And that's the way I'm taking it. But back in chapter 2, after she said, let his left hand embrace me, his right hand hold me, whatever it is, that's similar to that she said, he says, I adjure you, O daughters of Jerusalem, don't arouse love, or maybe she says it, don't arouse love until it's ready. Don't arouse her until she's ready. Don't arouse her to love until she's ready. Let love take its time. And then a little bit later in chapter 3, after that first dream sequence, she says, or the daughter, or the chorus, or somebody says, I adjure you, O daughters of Jerusalem, by the gazelles or by the hinds of the field, that you'll not arouse or awaken love until it pleases, or arouse or awaken my love until she pleases, whichever it means. But once again, I think it's the same idea. The saying, don't push too fast, don't hurry too fast. In the first time, it's because they are having such a good time together. There's like a cautionary warning that this is wonderful, but you can't push it. And the second time, it's because she's had this somewhat disturbing dream sequence where she can't find him. And again, it says, don't hurry it, don't rush it. And then here, it happens again. I want you to swear, O daughters of Jerusalem, do not arouse or awaken my love until she pleases. We drop the by the gazelles or the hinds of the field here, but the rest of it stays in place. I want you to swear is similar to I adjure you. Do not arouse is similar to I adjure you that you not arouse. Basically, he's reminding them again, don't awaken love too quickly. But then he goes on to say, beneath the apple tree, I awakened you. Remember way back when we were beneath the apple tree and you were comparing me to an apple tree and we were so close, that's when I awakened you. So I think what this song is saying is, yes, let love arise slowly. Let it develop slowly. Let it gradually wake up. And then he looks and says, do you remember? That's when you really first woke up. That's when we began to fall in love. That's when you began to realize that you were falling in love with me. That's when I awoke you to interest in me, to need, to desire for me, and to loving me. And he's remembering that fondly. So I think, again, what we've got is two people who've had a shared history, and they slowly, gradually grew in love with each other. And the day came when they had this moment when they connected romantically, and he says, do you remember that? And he's remembering it fondly because of that moment. So I think this is talking about waking up slowly to being in love, waking up slowly to love one another. And then notice the who is this? Said in chapter 3, what is this coming up from the wilderness? This amazing spectacle. Oh, look, it's Solomon coming for his bride. And then he turns it around here and says, who is this coming up from the wilderness? It's not Solomon. It's not smoke and spectacle. It's simply a woman leaning on the arm of her man as they walk up the field to look around and see the apple tree and see the place where she was born. And it's calm and quiet, but she's leaning on him. And she loves him, and he loves her. And he says, who is this? This is who she is. And I think the sense is that he's saying, she's more important to me and more remarkable to me and better to me than all that spectacle that happened in the Song of Solomon. He's saying, this is the one who is really worth paying attention to. This is what's really important. So it's sort of contrasting her and her being with him, with Solomon coming up with all his chariots and saying, this is better. This is more important. So putting it all together, here's what we get. She says, oh, I wish we could be close and I could be openly affectionate. Oh, you were like a brother to me who nursed at my mother's breasts. If I found you outdoors, I would kiss you. No one would despise me either. Think again of two childhood sweethearts, and she's begun to realize how much she loves him, and she's feeling constrained because she doesn't know if people will despise her for it, and she says, I wish I could just be as openly affectionate with you as if you were family. And I would lead you and bring you into the house of my mother who used to instruct me. I would give you spiced wine to drink from the juice of my pomegranates. Let his left hand be under my head and his right hand embrace me. I wish that we had this kind of openly affectionate relationship. What she's really realizing is that she wants for him to be family. She wants to marry him. She wants them to be together. And then he says, I want you to swear, O daughters of Jerusalem, or she does, somebody does, don't arouse or awaken love until it pleases. And then he says, who is this coming up from the wilderness, leaning on her beloved? Beneath the apple tree. He says, look, beneath the apple tree, that's where I awakened you. There your mother was in labor with you. There she was in labor and gave you birth. And he says, and so he's walking back up the hill with her, and they are together. And he's embracing her family, and she's embracing him. And he's saying, we've now come to where love has been awakened. You are in love with me. I'm in love with you. And we are heading for a relationship together. And it's kind of a peaceful resolution to everything that's been going on, in one sense, through the whole book. Although I think the book is an anthology. So that's how I see this. This might not be what it means, but it's the way I'm taking it for now. So what's the meaning for human love? First of all, it should be like coming home. There's a couple of songs that I was listening to a couple of years ago, some jazz songs. One says, it talks about how it feels like home to me to know you. And it should be like coming home. A good love relationship, a good marriage shouldn't feel all just strange and risky and exotic and exciting. I mean, exotic and exciting is fine, but that's not all there is to life. It should also feel comfortable and homey and like a place you can stay, like a place you can live in, like a place you can be secure and safe in. That's part of what human love should be. There's this motive, this idea here of childhood sweethearts, or at least people who've had a history together, that love opens up and develops and grows slowly. And you have a history together, and your families know each other, and you've experienced things together. That's a theme in a lot of romances, right? A lot of people in romantic movies, run off to the city and come back home, and they discover the childhood sweetheart they always had and never realized they were in love with, and now they are in love, and everything is just very natural because they've already got the friendship to build it on. And that's that's a theme for a reason. It's a theme because it hits a deep idea in our souls of what real love should be. There's the idea here again of a gradual awakening, of a long, slow history together where you gradually wake up to love for one another. And the grandeur of that's just as impressive as Solomon's chariots coming out of the wilderness it's the woman leaning on her beloved as they come up from the wilderness. So what's the meaning for our relationship with God? Well, I'm going to just simply ask you, there's a lot of ways I could have gone with this, but I decided this week what I wanted to do is just invite you to reflect on the long, slow, gradual history of God with you. What is your history with God? Think for a minute about your own life. How did you come to become aware that God loved you? What did he do to show you that he existed and that he had died for you and that he loved you and that you were important to him? And how did he awaken your need for him, your love for him? I think it's really useful to reflect on those things sometimes and go back and think about it. I've been recording another teaching for something completely different where I've been talking about the testimony of how I got saved. And it's really been encouraging to remember what happened when God brought me to salvation, because there was so much back there that was so deeply meaningful. And it's been 50 years now, almost 40 years. And I had almost forgotten it. But looking at it again was so good for me, just to remember, that's right. That's how God brought me to become aware of how much he loved me. So I just would like to invite you to think about, how has God worked in your life across the years? What has he done to show himself to you? What has he done to prove that he loves you? What has he done to draw you to him and to show you that you love and need him? And I just have a verse for you to think about. 1 John 4:16 says this: we have come to know and have believed the love which God has for us. That's what's happened to us. That's why we became saved in the first place, why we were drawn to salvation. And it's how we grow in Christ. We continually come to know in a deeper way and believe in a deeper way just how much God loves us. God is love. The one who abides in love abides in God, and God abides in him. Our Christian life, our growth in sanctification happens as we abide in the love of God. Our soul is fed and nourished and strengthened as we abide in the love of God for us. And that's how we learn to love others, is because we are so full up with the love of God for us. So this to me is this picture of Song of Solomon chapter 8, verses 1-5 is kind of a picture of that kind of satisfying relationship that we have when we settle into and recognize the history that God has with us and how he has gradually and slowly made us so that we come to know and believe how much he really loves us. Thanks. See you next week.